Hello, 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 and welcome to the Coaxum Report. This is Terry Coaxum. I am the host and executive director of the Coaxum Report. You can find us on Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, and Roku. And I also encourage you to download the app, OurTV.network. Watch us live anytime. Listen to us on the radio, WSTX Bloomberg. I am super excited today to be joined by Brandon Bryce. Brandon is joining us today. Brandon, how are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. Super excited to have you on this show today to drop some knowledge. I know you're going to be talking to us a little bit about fintech, but before we get there, let's just talk a little bit about who Brandon is and what you're bringing to the table and why you're playing in the space that you're playing in right now.
So, Brandon has, first of all, thank you all to all out there in TV land, radio land, social media land. I've recreated my purpose and myself because of this new fintech era.
Right.
And it's interesting because, recently I had a video where we talked about how Delaware can lead the way as becoming the next black tech hub of the world. And people said, well, what does that mean? Um, and we're not talking about just, technology, but we're talking about this new narrative of the reality that everything is becoming digitized,
That's
whether
right.
it's, your money, and there are still some concerns about that. But the reality is Delaware, and I'll give you a little history, and I'll give your folks a little history. In late 70s, we had a governor named Pete DuPont, and Pete DuPont uh, did something very different than any other governor at his time. He said we need to be the lead on the three C's which make up Delaware, which is chicken, credit cards, and chemicals. Right, three C's. We got Purdue, we got Visa Card, MasterCard, Discover, you choose. And then we've got the beauty of AstraZeneca, Nemours, Chemours, and DuPont. But it was interesting because at the time, the banking industry was looking to go out. They wanted to expand. And so at first, they looked at North Dakota. They said, too far. Then they looked at places like Wyoming, another tax haven, also too far. But then they said, what about Wilmington, Delaware?
Mhm.
And I'll get into this conversation because this is a very important conversation when we're talking about the future of technology in America and the future of fintech and how this can raise people of color out of poverty. Um,
But
when they
before we
decide,
get into
go ahead.
before we get into all of the specifics of that, Brendan, I know we will talk about fintech and what you're doing now and how it will definitely elevate people of color and why it's extremely important for us to do so. But before we get into that, I always like to start off by talking a little bit about how you got to where you are. And I know you from being in government when I
Yeah.
was working in SBA. You were also working in government as well over in New Jersey and then here
Mhm.
in New York. So I want to talk a little bit about your background because one of the things that happens when my listening audience, tune in, they want to
Mhm.
know who they're talking to. Like, who's Brendan? Like, you jump right on in. You was like, all right, let me tell you
Because
why this is what it is. But before we
you know
get
what? Because
there,
it's so important, Terry, as to who I've been and where we're going. And I
that's
say
right.
we,
So let's start about who you've been first, and then let's
sure,
elevate into where you're going because that's going to give even more credibility to the message that you have today around
sure.
fintech and why it's important and why we need to get on board and why Delaware is the space to play in right now. So let's talk a little bit first about who you are. Who is Brandon Bryce? Why is the Bryce
The
right? Like
Bryce is always right.
the Bryce is always
But the
right.
Bryce, the Bryce was right uh 10 years or 15 years. Ooh, I'm aging myself. 15 years ago when at the time I was working in government and really leading the charge on education reform in New Jersey.
That's right. I remember.
And this becomes really a testament to who I am because I am a education reformer and revolutionary when we talk about quality education for all kids, but specifically for young people of color.
That's right.
And really using education as the gateway to empower people, to raise them out of poverty, and to give them opportunities to take on the jobs of the future. And so you can't talk about my past without not talking about education reform, quality education, making sure that kids can read and that literacy rates are high. But
Hmm.
the other piece of that is that speaks to the conversation today because you can't, if you financial literacy plays into this fintech industry.
Hmm.
And it's interesting coming from Detroit, understanding and seeing the middle class. Uh,
Detroit to Delaware. Wow.
Detroit to Delaware, right, right, it rhymes. But coming from a place that birthed, in many cases, the middle class in
Yeah.
America,
Yeah.
and coming to the East Coast and seeing,
Automobile.
whether it's Wilmington, Baltimore, Newark, Jersey City, Philadelphia, Boston, we're
And don't,
seeing this.
and don't even try it. How you going to leave New York out?
Well, New York is New York.
Yeah,
New York will be all
exactly.
right.
Exactly.
New York is. I mean, New York is the banking capital of the
Of
world.
the world. Actual, absolutely.
But here's the reality: it's one place. And so when you're talking about this, it's not just about fintech. This conversation is about bringing America's middle class back, and it's about creating spaces where people, all people, but people of color can be a part of this new industry, which is either called fintech, which is around EV, and really breaking down what does that mean and why is it needed more so now than ever.
Right.
Um,
So we're gonna pause right there because I want to kind of bring it on home, right? So we're talking about Brandon Bryce, the educator. Brandon Bryce, who has been into politics and legislation regulation for numerous years. Brandon Bryce, a graduate from Howard, right? Brandon Bryce, a brother, Brandon Bryce, that has had several careers in nonprofit and for-profit organizations, and now you want to talk about this industry, this information technology industry, this fintech technology industry, and how important it is now to us, but more importantly, how we should definitely be paying attention and be a part of the conversation. Because I always tell my students, Brandon, I tell them, if you're not on the menu, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It's not that decisions are being made. Decisions are still being made for us. We're just not at the table making those decisions. We're actually on the menu with decisions being made for us.
well,
And so that's
Terry,
why it's really
there no
important to
longer
have
is a
this
menu.
conversation.
The menu is even digitized now.
Yeah, but it's still a menu. A menu is still a menu, whether it's a digital menu with a QR code, you scan in a picture and the menu's jumping up, it's still a menu. And so that's why it's extremely important for us to have this conversation at this time. And I think I mentioned to you, we're doing a NOLA conference, a digital conference with Rochelle Young. She's going to be on the show in a couple of weeks talking about just what that looks like, just what that artificial intelligence looks like, and why we should be involved, and why all these organizations and companies should definitely be a part of this conversation. It's going to be rolled out in a way that is going to be palatable, because a lot of this information goes over heads. That's why I wanted you to start it from the ground. Like you got on the top of the elevator, but I wanted you to come back down to the ground floor and explain, especially to the listening audience. Remember, the entire Caribbean is listening to this, right? Southeast Asia. This is a conversation that's being heard around the world. So I want to make sure that they are hearing why you're bringing this message, but more importantly, how to get involved. Because there are barriers to this industry. There are some best practices that we'll talk about today, and of course, some big ideas around where you believe that folks should be in order to be in the process, on at the table and not on the menu. And so now let's jump back in and tell us why. There's a method to all of this. Tell us why this is important. Why is fintech important? We're sitting here in New York, in financial capital of the world. The show is being produced by Anthony Weeks out in the U.S. Virgin Islands. You're in Delaware right now, taping the show. Tell us why this all comes together in such a perfect package to be able to explain what the next step should be. Talk to me.
So, three things to your listeners and viewers. Number one, invest in Wilmington, Delaware. And I'll talk about Wilmington 2.0, the Wilmington Triangle, and what I call this concept of Silicon Valley East. Yes, Silicon Valley East. Number two, how do we deal, and speaking to my past, how do we deal with it now? Math, science, reading, and arithmetic is no longer something that we can avoid. It's no longer something that we can get around. This is the foundation of society moving forward. If our children don't and can't read, or if the literacy rates aren't accurate or up to date, or if there's an issue around basic math, this will be the decision barriers between the haves and the have-nots. So we have to address that. Number two. Number three, when we talk about technology, I thought Atlanta was on the right direction or path to becoming this Black technological hub. That has halted. And so as you look at places like California, where tech companies are leaving California in droves, they're considering places like Texas, places like Tennessee. But here's the challenge. When you look at location, Wilmington, Delaware, and Delaware as a specific, is literally in the middle of Washington, D.C., the power of the country, and New York City, the money of the country. And so when you're talking about any type of global investment, Wilmington, Delaware becomes what I call this Silicon Valley East. It's a place where when those companies are leaving California because of the high taxation and they're looking for a place to set up shop, we are the incorporation capital of the United States. More than 6 million companies are based right here in Little Wilmington, Delaware. And so it's a unique conversation because it's one that challenges our location. It's one that challenges what is the fintech industry and how do we get more people of color involved in it and up to understand why and what it is. But two, it creates a subcontract industry for people of color who want to start and get into the industry around technology as a whole, whether it's Google, whether it's Twitter, whether it's social media or social networks. This is the place to invest. And I'll go a step further, is that when you look at places like California, where, San Francisco, where the average rate for an apartment is $3,000 to $4,000 for a studio. I mean, this is not me joking. Companies are looking for other places to invest, in addition to setting up shop where they can be next to Washington, D.C. and New York City. And so I saw this as an opportunity where 40 years ago, Governor DuPont had the vision on making Delaware this credit card capital of the United States. But we're a little bit past credit cards now. We're talking about every form of banking right now is digital. When we're talking about the technological space, and what does that mean for the new EV industry that's coming to the United States, and are we prepared for that?
It's here already. It's here already.
But it's not just here's the catch. It's not just in right now. It's not just in the auto industry. We're talking about energy. We're talking about the way that you live is literally on the brinks of changing. And people of color, this is the opportunity for us to finally get balanced and be a part of that change, where now we can begin to level out the playing field. The other thing is, when we talk about leveraging,
you're going too fast. Again, I need you to.
The other thing is, when we talk about leveraging, one of the things that we can leverage the most is the leader of the free world, the most powerful person in the world, is in our backyard. And so when you think about Wilmington, Delaware, and what does that mean, and why is that so important in this conversation around technological innovation, fintech, and then more importantly, what I care most about is creating this Black tech hub, is because when we're not talking about a mythical Wakanda, we're talking about we can have that here right in Wilmington using the banking industry.
Okay,
this
good.
Is our
so let's pause for a minute, because you're putting a lot out there, and I want to make sure that the listening audience is grasping what you're saying. And so we're talking about leveraging, but I still want to go back, because we still haven't told them what fintech is. We're talking technology, we're talking fintech, we're talking artificial intelligence, we're talking banking, we're talking leveraging, we're talking opportunities, right? But before we can get to all of that, we need to tell the listening audience exactly what that is. So the fintech industry, right? And I want you to explain it from a standpoint of, and I always tell my students when I'm doing interviews with them, especially when they're looking, when I was working for Chuck and I had all these students that wanted to go into the academy, I used to say, if you can get Chuck Schumer on the elevator, I need you to give me 3 points of why he should give you this recommendation to go into the academy, right? Similar to that. Because right now, I want to make sure you're not leaving anyone behind in this conversation. I understand the basis of this is investing in Wilmington, Delaware, in a space that can be the technology hub for the world, basically, right? I understand that. But what I need you to bring back to me is, one, remember, we're talking about barriers. We're talking about barriers first. What are the barriers to this industry? What is this fintech industry? What are the barriers to this industry? And why is it important that we are on board so that we are able to leverage? And then think about places like Wilmington, Delaware to invest in, because if I'm hungry, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get everything that you're giving to me right now, even though they're nuggets. I need these nuggets to feed as we're going along. So I want you to dial it back just a little bit so that we can understand why it's important for especially businesses, because this is all about our small business, right? We want to empower our small business so that they can grow. We're talking about legacy building. We're no longer talking about working a 9 to 5. We're literally talking about investing in your business so that your business can grow. This is an industry where they'll be able to do that. This is also an industry where they can leverage what they have to take to another level and be in another space, because digitally we can work anywhere. I can be on the beach right now in the Virgin Islands having this conversation with you and still be able to get everything that I needed if I had broadband, if I had a computer, if I had all of this technology that exists. So tell me a little bit about how this fintech industry is changing the game, and not just fintech, artificial intelligence. It's changing the game. You just said something that was so powerful. You said right now we're here where the world is changing around us. Technology is changing the game significantly. We joked about it, but you don't have to have a menu. I can take a picture of that menu
Yeah.
and literally order my dinner and have somebody pick it up. And shortly we're going to have a drone come drop it off, whatever that looks like for us. But I don't want my small businesses to be left behind. So I need to dial it back a little bit for us to really kind of understand the barriers to this industry so we can understand the importance of how we're elevating to that next level to be able to leverage a place like Wilmington, Delaware, to be able to build wealth, not just as quote unquote the corporation capital of the world, so to speak. And we know we go to Wilmington, Delaware, there's a lot of corporations there because the taxes are different in Delaware than there are any other place. And so you built this industry where corporations are starting in Wilmington, Delaware. The same thing when we talk about the banks and the credit cards. The credit card companies are there. The interest rates, there's a lot of different, but you glossed it over that, and that's important because most of
So
us have credit cards in our wallets that we're using to do everyday business in this digital economy.
so there's so much that you
As
just said, and I want to go back because if we're going to take Google Gaga steps here. The first thing is we cannot have a conversation about fintech without addressing, and I'm talking us, without addressing the level of and quality of education in our classrooms.
right,
You cannot have that because that is the foundation.
right,
You
and I mean
cannot address it where you're
that's right,
talking about basic math, basic reading,
that's right,
basic listening comprehension skills that adolescent learns when they're in their tentative years. So the first thing is we've got to make education reform. It is our civil rights issue of this time.
that's right, and the thing about that, which is so important that you just mentioned, is COVID really put a black eye on this industry, right? On education, because it made us realize that we had individuals that were in school that did not have internet at home. They weren't able to access
Yeah.
anything digitally because when everything shut down, they didn't have a computer at home. They didn't have broadband in their neighborhood and so we've since, right that wrong, so to
Mhm.
speak, and especially underprivileged neighborhoods where individuals who did not have access. Because what they found out is there were great companies coming out. I'm not going to call any names, but they were giving tablets to low income individuals, and then they realized the tablets were like a paperweight because there was no broadband access in their neighborhoods. So that had to change, and they had to get hotspots and all this other stuff. So that's number one. You're absolutely right. The fundamentals, the education reform is fundamental. Reading, writing, math, fundamental, right? And in order for
So
us
yeah,
to be in order, especially for us Black and Brown individuals, in order to level the playing field, that education is very important. And in education, with that education, we need to have access to the technology that you're talking about, right? So we need to have, access to this digital economy in order for us to invest in spaces that you're talking about. Another hiccup that came about COVID, another thing,
mhm,
we had companies that were not doing business digitally and they were closed, and some of them will never come back, right? But they understood, one, you had to now have a website, you had to have a place now to purchase your goods and services online. This is really fundamental to what you're talking
yeah,
about now.
yeah,
So if you don't have a website and I can't purchase your goods and your services and your widgets because your brick and mortar spot is closed, that's a huge barrier for our business. So now we understand that these are fundamental things that need to be
mhm.
in place. So we talked about that. You talked about the importance of that. Now what's next?
So here's okay. So we got education out of the way. That's
Right,
the first thing.
right.
But next, we have to address the issue of automation. Now,
Uh,
why is automation so critical?
okay.
Because when you, and especially this is related to your business persons who are watching this show today. Automation, and let's go with technology. Why do we like technology? Because Americans like it faster, they like it more efficient, more cost efficient, and they like to do it cheaper. Technology is a help, it's not a hindrance.
That's
The
right.
problem is that when you look at automation, and now you're talking about where are the jobs going. 20 years ago, you and I would have laughed if we would have said that a robot could make our McDonald's meal and make our Happy Meal. Well, guess what, folks? It's here today.
That's right.
This is not, this is
This is
2023,
not the
and you can.
Jetsons. This
This is
is
not the
life.
Jetsons. I mean, you can literally go get a burger made by Johnny Five. And so my point is Johnny Five short circuit. So my point is that the conversation for minority business owners
Yes.
has to be very different. And here's the catch. I've always said that the racism is in the algorithms. It's not necessarily person to
Mm,
person. It's in the algorithms because, and let me say this, because now today's economy, the question is, how do I, it's not necessarily how do I employ someone with the skills to do a job, but the question is through coding and all these other organizations that do this, that, it's how do I employ someone who can actually code the program to do that work? And that comes back to education, because
that's
now you're
right.
talking about, do you have the skills of basic math, basic geometry, basic all the other stuff that you probably fell asleep on when you were in class,
Most of
algebra,
us sleeping.
fractions. These things matter because that is the future of America's workforce. We
That's right.
cannot get around it. And the beauty of that is that it's not just us African Americans that are struggling, it's people across all ethnic groups, people across all socioeconomic issues, because we've got to make it a priority in our school systems.
That's
Now,
right.
here's the other beauty to that. If you look at where four-year colleges are going, for the first time in America, we've seen a drop.
Yes.
And what that's saying is that people are waking up and they're saying, well, wait a minute, debt is high. Again, fintech, but my debt is high.
That's
Do
right.
I need to necessarily go to a Harvard, Yale, or Princeton to be successful? Do I, and here's the examples. I mean, you've got, Elon Musk, who in some cases, well, not a bad example. You've got Bill Gates. You've got so many other people who either didn't finish college or dropped out or didn't go, but they understood the market. And so I
That's
go back
right.
to your listeners when we talk about fintech, because we're talking about is an easier way to do our banking. It's an easier way to do things through the use of technology. That's all it is.
That's
But
right.
it's more of, are we ready and prepared as a community to understand that, yes, social justice is important. I'm not saying it's not, but the market and the industry is what we need to focus on top of our data has never been more important than it is today. Your digital footprint, meaning what you search, meaning what you look, what you observe online, meaning who you are, your age, your consumer practices. All of these things now matter because the companies are taking advantage of them. And ironically, they're using it for you and to you. But the
Okay.
question is, do you have control of your own data?
And that's why the digital economy and this conversation around the information is going to be so important. So we're going to take a quick break right now, and we'll be right back. And we're going to jump right into that artificial intelligence and all that information and data that's actually being used. You're not getting the benefit of the usage of your data. So let's jump back in. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're on with Brandon Bright.
I used to watch BET, MTV, VH1, now I watch Tempo. Soca, Calypso, Reggae Dancehall. Don't stall, better get tuned in to the tempo. Don't have cable, they got an app. Go to your app store, download that. Whether it's tourism, cuisine, or the social scenes, if it ain't Tempo, it's a rap. Who got the Caribbean views? Tempo. Mr. Latest in Caribbean news? Tempo. You tryna cook Caribbean food? Tempo. You know they got the music videos too. Tempo. Who got the Caribbean views? Tempo. Mr. Latest in Caribbean news? Tempo. You tryna cook Caribbean food? Tempo. You know they got the music videos too. Tempo.
ATL runs on V Plus Energy. We love our home and our people. We at V Plus made it our mission to provide healthy energy to our city, so that's what we did, and you all love it. 5 fruits, 5 vegetables, 5 vitamins. It's healthy, tasty energy. But don't just take my word. Listen for yourself.
Man, I found a lot of energy drinks. It tastes good. That's one of the biggest things. Refreshing, and it's not too strong. So I like it, man.
People, it's Alexander Aperture, the commercial king, and check this out, man. We're here with V Plus Energy. Look, you try to get your energy up. You out here in a competition like this, man. Field day. You're gonna need something, get a little extra kick. Make sure you get that V Plus Energy. That way.
Hey, what's up? It's Clay Johnson Russian, and we are checking in with the V Plus Energy drink. This drink is amazing. I love that it don't give you the jitters. Energy you need. If you haven't tried it, please check it out.
Energy drink is very good. I like the peach flavor.
And so far, I'm trying to see if the energy kicks in.
I guess that energy kicked in. Now it's time to get you some. Visit drinkvplus.com.
ICABA, ICABA, stands for the International Career and Business Alliance. And basically, it's really about building, activating relationships that grow wealth.
What is ACABA doing? ACABA is putting you in an environment where you can rub shoulders, you can actually talk to wealth creators, to entrepreneurs who may look like you, who may come from circumstances like you, who may come from an environment like your environment. And then once you go ahead and grab that baton, you might say, well, this is possible. This individual over here did it, and now I can do it. So ICABA is raising our level of vision, and they're doing a fantastic.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Coaxum Report. Again, we have Brandon Bryce on today. Brandon has really been dropping a lot of nuggets around fintech, the information technology space. Really been talking about his background and why it's important for us to be involved. For those of you that are just joining the Marketplace Coaxum Report, my name is Terry Coaxum. I'm your host. You can join us on our TV network. You can also listen to us on Roku, on Fire, on Amazon Fire TV. You can also listen to us on the radio, WSTX Bloomberg. So I encourage you to download the app and listen to us each week. And we're going to turn it back over to Brandon. Brandon was dropping some more nuggets around information technology when we left. And so I just want to jump back into that so we don't lose the momentum around why it's important for us to be a part of the conversation now, but more importantly, to get involved. And for our small business, we know technology is important. We understand the education, the literacy. We talked about the foundation of it. Then we moved in to talking about why it was important for us to have these platforms that we can sell our goods and our widgets and all that stuff. And now Brendan's getting more into the financial piece of it, and then also around information technology. And then he wants to share why he believes that Delaware is a place for individuals that are looking to have this technology, to have these breaks, to have some incentives to want to do this work and do this work well, as a space for them to do it in. So Brandon, talk to us.
I'm numbers and data driven.
That's right.
I no longer have an opinion. I'm serious. It's the numbers that work. Let me give you some hard facts. We got 1 million people in Delaware. There are more people in the city of Philadelphia than the entire state of Delaware, which has its advantages. Wilmington, we got about 100,000 people. And what's interesting is if you look at Wilmington, you're talking about a city that's 69% African American and a state that is 14% African American. And so when I talked about earlier this Wilmington Triangle, I got this concept from Raleigh, North Carolina. When you look at their educational academic triangle, it's literally why people have been investing in Raleigh. You saw something similar to this in Atlanta through the AUC, but I think Delaware is a little different because with Wilmington, we're a little bit more savvy in the area of understanding the financial markets because we've been the financial hub for over 40 years. And so I think when I talk to people of color, I'm saying that if you have a business, if you have a background in engineering or technology, come to Wilmington, Delaware, because I see this as, again, this Wakanda thing. And one thing I saw in this I'm a huge Black Panther fan. I got to put that out there. But one thing that, forget Marvel, let's talk about what it did. It pushed the light bulb in people's minds to say for the first time that in our communities, learning and technology and innovation was cool. Science and math and using it to create, whether it's energy, whether it's opportunities, whether it's something being used to help someone else, was cool. And so what we did is we made, we created this atmosphere where knowledge and learning and technology was something that we wanted to be the best at. And so I use that to say, when we're talking about creating this new Wilmington, this Wilmington 2.0, what does that mean? And how do we create a space where people will say, I want to invest there, I want to live there because it's safe. And also I want to be at the precipice of this new technology revolution. And so I always say, the revolution it will be digital. It's here. And the reality is, if we can either get on the train or we'll be left off the train, but the train is moving. The train is moving right now. And so this is an opportunity where I think people of color who are educated and want to create this space and be a part of this fintech revolution, they can come to Wilmington. Now, let me speak more on this Silicon Valley East and where we got that concept from. Silicon Valley East is, Silicon Valley, everybody knows it. It's the valley. It's up in, Palo Alto. It's where all the tech cool folks hang out. But here's the problem. And this speaks to government. The taxes are too high in California. and there's not a pro-friendly business place for businesses. And so what are those companies saying? They're saying, you know what? We can get more output in Texas. The problem is no one, I don't know about you, very few people like 121-degree heat. And so now they're saying, well, where else can we go? Wilmington, Delaware. Because at the end of the day, if I got a meeting with the president or a US senator, I'm 2 hours away. If I got a meeting with Jamie Dimon on Wall Street, I'm 2 hours away and I can get home by dinner. And so that's the reason why when we came up with this concept of Silicon Valley East, we said, how can we bring industry to Delaware? But also, how can we get those people who live here, who live in the greater Philadelphia area, how do we get them in the game? And how do we make it to where now, whether you are the man who's the CEO or the COO or the vice president, or you are the person who is the contractor, subcontractor, or a manager, you can be a part of this new technological revolution because there's jobs across the board and they need to be filled. And what better place, rather than bringing from without, what better place to start having the conversation of revolutionizing education that it follows the industry and the trends. And so again, this can't be us saying what we think needs to happen. We have to follow the data and we have to follow industry trends to tell us where the jobs are going to be.
Okay, so I think I think I want to pause right there because it's really important. Like what I hear you saying is location, 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 right? So we're talking about Wilmington, Delaware being the location, but there's also a couple of other, there's a lot of emphasis around the importance of the fintech technology, so the financial technology. It's also a lot of the rules and regulations as they apply to us. That's been barriers because that's what we talk about here. We talk about the barriers. So those barriers are broken down in the Wilmington, Delaware area, right? And then we're also talking about access, right? So we're having access to this technology, access to individuals that we'll need to have conversations with, but more importantly, my small businesses will have the access they need to grow their business in the Wilmington, Delaware area. And I'm sure, I'm going to have a lot of people from New York be like, okay, I'm going to come on and talk about why New York, right? Or some folk going to come from Atlanta. You know how hot Atlanta folks are. They're going to come on and talk about why it's important to do business in Atlanta or even in South Carolina and these other places. And so I just want to really, really focus today though on why you're the messenger. Like why do you think that it's important at this time in this season? And I mean, I have a pretty good idea why, but I want you, to say, because again, we talk about barriers. We talked about the barriers to access to technology, right? The access to finances, right? Because that's been a huge barrier, especially for my small business. Every time I have a conversation with a business, I just had a conversation the other day, usually access to capital. And that can look different ways. I'm not just talking about loan products. I'm talking about if you have a $500,000 contract and then you have to build out a service for the government, you need access to capital to be able to build that service out. Even though, right now you're looking at this thing down the line, you need that contract funding to be able to build out that capital. And so small businesses are trying to do that, right? Other things that have come up in a lot of these conversations is that technology, right? That barrier to entry because of the technological differences. And what you're saying is, okay, here is a place where we'll have all of that stuff so that you can build and grow your business out. And so, but I want to go back to the messenger. I want to go back to, and this is important because you know us, right? We spread out, word of mouth is still number one, right? So if I say to my listening audience, listen, this is a great place for you to explore based on all of these things that Brandon is talking about. He's talking about the location. He's talking about access. He's talking about the tax incentives. He's talking about all of these things, right? He's saying, take a look at Wilmington, Delaware, right? But I want to talk about why. Why do we think that? Go ahead. You got
4 C's. I'm going to say it again. Chancery, chicken, credit cards, chemicals.
Okay.
But here's the catch, though. I just gave you 4 C's. Well, 3 C's, really.
Yeah, 3.
I just gave you 3 C's. But now we're talking about subcontract opportunities.
And
Purdue Chicken, billion-dollar company. DuPont, multi-billion-dollar company. Discover and MasterCard, Visa. I don't even need to go into detail. So the question is, how do we create the opportunity to create subcontract opportunities for qualified people that are ready to get the business day one? That's the first thing. You mentioned barriers. I want to go back to the taxes and the advantage of how the tax structure is set up in Delaware, which is business friendly. So if it's business friendly for corporations, don't you think it could be business friendly for you? And I think what it does is that it creates the opportunity where we've got to prepare people before they even get to starting their business to make sure they've got the skills, to make sure that they have a sufficient business plan, feasibility study. These are things that are no brainers, but they're the things that are keeping people out of the game. And so we've got some homework to do ourselves if we're talking about creating a space where now you can be part of what we would consider be a part of that conversation around economic freedom. Again,
That's right.
fintech, not that hard, because when we hear fintech, it sounds like this something out of Star Wars or Star
Financial
Trek. No,
technology. That's all.
it's simple. It's technology advancement that's making it easier for you to live your life. That's what it is. Very simple. The other piece of that, and why I say Wilmington, is because, again, if you're looking at the history of this place, our governor 40 years ago had it right. The challenge is now you're talking about homogenous places where the world needs to know about Wilmington, Delaware. Now, here's the catch. The world does know about Wilmington, Delaware through a man by the name of President Joe Biden. But the question that I pose is the White House, and this is a fundamental question, is we can leverage so many resources just from the fact that the president is in our backyard.
Mhm.
Because what that does is that creates a space where the world can say, well, tell me more about what's going on in Wilmington. Oh, by the way, most people on the planet eat chicken. Most people on the planet use some form of credit card or some form of purchasing processes.
That's right.
And most people have in some way or shape or form dealt with a chemical or dealt with some form of pharmaceutical.
That's
It's
right.
all here.
That's right.
And so my point is, you don't have to go across the Grove or across the country. You can go right to where? Wilmington, Delaware.
Right. So we're talking about, again, back to opportunities and location, location, right? And so, I mean, I think it's important for us, for all of those that are they're listening to us, whether you're coming to us by way of our TV network, you're listening to us on Amazon or Roku, or if you are listening to us on radio, it's really important for you to understand that we are bringing, Brendan's my guest today, and he's bringing a lot of nuggets around barriers. We talked about the barriers, the access, the barriers, best practices, which is what he's talked about a lot of here, and what's going on in Wilmington, Delaware, and how the space and the technology is available, and all of these things going back from the inception of the three C's. And then I want to kind of horn in a little bit on big ideas, right? Because this is how we bring it all together on this show. We talked about the barriers, because there's access to capital is always number one. But when you're talking about financial technology and artificial intelligence and incentives to go to any space, right? Because right now, the way that the world is, we literally can do business anywhere digitally. It just is possible, right? It's not like the Jetsons when way back when we looked at the show and it's like, yeah, that's not all of that's possible. And you started off by talking about how some of that is really possible. I can literally order something on Amazon and I can get it later on today. That was something that wasn't always possible.
But hold on. But Terry, here's the question. How many subcontractors does Amazon have? What if Coaxum was the new company that partnered with them to transfer goods and services? So my point is that's when you talk about social justice, that's my conversation, is less on the rhetoric, more on access and opportunity.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, even when we talk about those subcontracting opportunities, again, it's now there are no boundaries on where you can subcontract that, right? So those opportunities are available. And we just had a conversation around melanin, by melanin people getting contracts here in New York, because New York has a high goal. Like their goal is 30% of all contracts must go to an MWBE, which is Minority Women Business Enterprise, right? And then looking at these dismal numbers at 2% getting contracts, that kind of scares you, right? When you're an MWBE and you're looking to do business with government. But it goes back to what you said before, it's the foundation, right? So it's having that technical support. It's making sure that you have the capacity to do the work, that you have contract funding to do the work, that you have contract opportunities. And we talked about some of the subcontract opportunities, but even prime. There are prime opportunities for individuals to actually do a lot of this work. And then building on that to build out to be a contractor for Amazon or Google or any of these other companies, which is a possibility now because the financial technology exists, the information technology exists, and we're in a world now where we're using our computer. These things, everything we need is in our palm. We don't even need to go to an actual computer, laptop, or desktop. We're actually walking around with a hotspot in our phones, and we can connect anywhere in the world. And so it's really important for our businesses to have that technology at their fingertips so that they can build and grow their businesses out. And then Brandon is saying to us, in addition to that, here are all these other incentives that you can take hold to and do business in Wilmington, Delaware, because the tax breaks, because of the 3 C's, because of their location, because of the opportunities, because of the subcontracting, because of all of these things. And what I hear you saying is that it's business friendly, and that's what
30
we're
minutes,
looking for.
30 minutes from Philadelphia, 1 hour from Baltimore, 45 minutes from
Yeah,
Atlantic City,
they need to send you
52
an
minutes
ad
from the
spot.
Poconos, right in the middle. 2 hours from New York, 2 hours to DC. But I mean, and that's the cherry on the top. But you mentioned something that is very important before I leave that I want to convey is when we talk about what does this Black Tech Hub look like? It addresses social needs through commerce, e-commerce, and it creates a space which says, yeah, I don't have to necessarily work in the Dollar Trees of the world, but I can be a subcontractor to a Fortune 500 company, or I can create my own business through something that's needed around supply chain management. And you and I talk about this all the time. Black people, we've been in the business of supply chain management for centuries. We used to call it cutting corners. That's supply chain management. So my point is, and it's how do you do more with less? Well, guess what? That's how technology works. It's doing more with less and less steps. And we've got an opportunity to change it. Again, I call it Wilmington 2.0, where our goal is to bring and create this new focus of what I call Silicon Valley East, bringing it to Wilmington, Delaware. And last but not least, I think we've got an amazing opportunity to create something great where imagine if Wilmington, Delaware was the Black tech capital of the world. That means the United States, the Caribbean, and Africa. When we talk about international global businesses around technology, all of them have a hub right here in Wilmington.
And I say dream big. Why not? Right? Why not? Having the Black technology hub, and in itself is so significant, right? And then you've already laid out the plan why it should be in Wilmington, Delaware. And again, all of those that are watching, you can join us again on Amazon, Android, Apple, and download the app. But I mean, I really need you to hear the nuggets and the incentives around why Brandon is on today talking about the technology, the importance of the technology, how to leverage the technology more importantly, while location is important, because we talk about this all the time. And I mean, when we're in this session talking about best practices and big ideas, he's laying it out for why these 3 C's are important and why, Wilmington, Delaware is a space that we need to be playing in simply because the opportunities exist and it can be the Black technology hub.
That's right.
Based on everything that Brandon has laid out for us. And so I'm really excited that you're excited, Brandon. And more importantly, I'm really excited that the opportunity exists to have a Black technology hub. And I think that is a significant undertaking within itself. And more importantly, I want all the business owners that are listening today to understand that, you no longer have these barriers that exist that you can't do business throughout the world. You can now do business throughout the world. And the technology exists for you to be able to do this business. Wilmington, Delaware is offering you opportunities to do this business and do it in a space that is business friendly. And then I would also like to add that wherever you decide to lay your hat, Papa was a Rolling Stone, right? Wherever you wherever you decide to lay your business hat at, I think it's really important for you to think about the outline that Brandon just laid out to you. Make sure that it is technology friendly. Make sure that it is a space where you have these incentives and these tax breaks and it's business friendly, not just technology, but business friendly. And more importantly, you have the support and encouragement that you need to build your business and grow your business. Wilmington, Delaware is the corporation capital of the world. We have the 3 C's that Brandon just laid out for us. And so, I'm super excited to see where this conversation will go, Brandon. I'm encouraged and I believe that your message today is going to resonate with a lot of others. You're going to get some more opportunities to come on. I would not be surprised if you become the billboard, the digital billboard that is, for Wilmington, Delaware, and all the great opportunities that exist in that space. And it's all about locations. I want to thank you so much, Brandon, for being on the show today. And I know silly how time flies when you're having fun. And so, we're at that mark. But before we leave, Brandon, I want you to leave something with our listening audience. We talked about some barriers, some best practices, some big ideas. And you talked about Wilmington being that space to be the Black Technology Hub and why it's important for us to even have a Black Technology Hub, because that wasn't something that was always considered, right? But now it is being considered, and you're saying Wilmington, Delaware is a space for it to be considered in. So I want you to leave some final thoughts.
Wilmington listen, and I'll say it again, Wilmington 2.0, we've done this before. In 1978, the mayor, one of my favorites, Maynard Jackson, had a vision to make Atlanta this global mecca for Black entrepreneurs. That vision came to pass. Hindsight, 40 years later, we've got a vision to make Wilmington, Delaware, the Black tech hub of the world. That vision will come to pass. Invest in Wilmington, Delaware 2.0.
And I just want to thank Brandon again for being a part of this show. And for all of you that are joining us, you can join us again and listen to it on Amazon Fire TV Live, Android, Roku, and more importantly, download the app OurTV.network. Thank you, Brandon, for being a part of the Coaxum Report. And I'm encouraged today, that we are going to have a Black Technology Hub. And I thank you for being a part of the Marketplace, the Coaxum Report. Have a super amazing day on purpose. Take care.
Delicioso, 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 delicioso.
V Plus Energy. With 5 fruits, 5 vegetables, 5 vitamins, you no longer have to sacrifice your health for energy. Drink V Plus. Healthy energy. No sacrifice.
Good.